In the very beginning of our time together, John, we had these 9 things in front of him, and he looked them over and he separated these things, and he proceeded to pick up, it was a pair of eyeglasses that belonged to our victim. And the information he provided was so specific in nature, there was no way he could have known these things. He called her by her name. He described her physically, very specific details, described her family, her how many children, and said she's on the other side.
Right, this is all right in the beginning of you sitting with him.
Right from the beginning.
Hello, Heal Squad. We are back with our friend and psychic medium, John Edward. If you guys missed part 1 of my interview, you have to check it out. He dropped in some great tips on how to shift your energy, some grieving tips and predictions, of course, for the rest of the year. But today, John is not alone. He is joined by his co-author, retired FBI agent Robert Hilland. Together they wrote Chasing Evil, the true story of how this totally unexpected duo teamed up to crack cold murder cases, including the infamous John Smith disappearances, and how they learned to actually trust each other along the way. This one's going to be a good one, guys, so let's dive in. All right. Well, Robert, I'm going to start with you. So initially, you wanted to have my dear friend John arrested, apparently. You wanted to oust him as a fraud. What was it about John that had you so kind of up in arms, and what changed?
Well, when I heard him on the radio, none of what he was doing made any kind of sense to me, and I was somewhat insulted that people would be so stupid as to think something like this could be real. So I would
Meaning
dismiss.
his readings on with people?
Right, psychics aren't real. What he does is not a legitimate thing, right? That's what I thought back then, and I would shut him off. And then a week or two later, I'd hear him again, and so on and so on. And then it just so happened that one of my cases, um, there were no active leads. Everything had been exhausted. It was cold for a reason. And then I heard him on the radio one day, and I decided, you know what, I'm going to call his office, which I did, not expecting that they were going to say, come on in. And the next week, I think it was, they said, are you available to come in? And so I went to him with the impression that he was a con, that he wasn't who he said he was, and that either that was going to be revealed real quick in the first couple minutes because I had set him up a little bit, or worst case scenario, if this was legit, maybe he's going to give me something. So that was the premise by which I met him.
And at the time, you were in the FBI,
That's right.
and you obviously were, let's say, entertained by the idea of this helping you. Why was this case so important for you?
Well, I think this case was important because I was previously a police officer in New Jersey, which is where that case kind of originated. So although I didn't work it, I was very familiar with the case. And I knew the men and women who had worked it for many years and knew their frustration. And now I was in a position with the FBI, surrounded by a lot of experienced people and more resources, and I thought I could contribute in some way. So there was a personal connection for me. Keeping in mind, I probably had 20 other cases I was working at the time, but this particular case, there wasn't anything that was necessarily missed. So it was cold for a reason. It was a dead end.
Got it. Will you tell us a little bit about the case?
Yeah, so the abbreviated version, a guy comes in to the station October 4th of 1991, about 10 o'clock at night, named John Smith, who says his wife is missing. The circumstances that unfolded clearly suggested something nefarious happened to her, and he likely was responsible for her disappearance. In the course of that investigation, the investigators learned that, lo and behold, another wife in 1974 by the name of Janice had disappeared under very similar circumstances.
Another one of his wives?
I'm sorry, yes, another one of his
Okay.
wives. Yes, yes. The circumstantial case was very strong, but it lacked any physical evidence. There were no bodies, there was no smoking gun, if you will. And in law enforcement, we say there's a difference between knowing something and proving it. And I think the consensus with the many people investigated, they all knew he likely did this, but weren't unable to prove it at that point.
Mm. So, 2 wives gone,
Right,
no leads,
right,
no clues, nothing.
right.
and this man is just walking around New Jersey.
At the time, we didn't even know where he was. He had vanished. This is before 9/11. This is 1998. Um, Everybody lost track of him. Nobody knew where he was, compounded with the fact that his true name was John Smith, which is the most common name among men in the United States. So there were only a few 100,000 of those guys running around.
Wow. Okay, so that makes it even harder to find him.
Right.
So John and you guys connect. What happens then?
Well, the only thing he knew that I was from the FBI and I was on a squad investigating unsolved murders and missing people. He knew that this case involved a missing person, didn't know anything beyond that. His assistant instructed me to bring in belongings of whoever this person was that I was interested in finding. So we brought 5 items that belonged to that victim. Her name was Fran, Betty Fran. But that morning before I went to meet John, I went around my office and I asked 4 women that I worked with, could I borrow your necklace, your watch, things of that nature.
You set him up. That's what you meant by I set him up.
Well, I mean, it was either going to be very evident in the beginning if he picks up one of these other items and he starts going down some trail, it's going to be real easy for me to realize, so thank you for your time, and I would have walked out. But in the very beginning of our time together, John, we had these 9 things in front of him, and he kind of looked them over and he separated these things and he said, "Look, I don't know what these things are, but I don't they don't have anything to do with why you're here." And he proceeded to pick up, it was a pair of eyeglasses that belonged to our victim. And the information he provided was so specific in nature, it shocked me. There was no way he could have known these things. He called her by her name. He said she has 2 names. It's like Mary Jane, Betty Fran, but it's she goes by the middle name Fran. He described her physically, very specific details, like she had metal screws or pins in her hip. She had breast implants, which is very relevant. Described her family, her how many children, and said she's on the other side and she's been killed. The person responsible for her death is a boyfriend or husband. It's a J first name. I'm fairly certain it's the name is John.
Right, this is all right in the beginning of you sitting with him.
Right from the beginning. Yeah.
John, I'm celebrating here because you're my friend. And I'm just so like, I feel like, yes, yes. Like, wow. Okay.
Right. So then as we continued, he was very clear. He did not want me or the detective that I was with to give him any feedback. We were to remain silent and just listen to the things he was saying. And he also said, "Hey, I may say things that you may not resonate with you, but it's important you write these things down." And shortly thereafter, he asked about the name Michael. Well, Michael is the brother of John Smith. And as soon as he hit on Michael, he says, Michael is the key to this case. Michael knows the information. Michael knows what happened here. And what was interesting is, going through 20 years of law enforcement investigative reports, there's what's said in the documents, but then I had the luxury of talking with the investigators over the years who actually worked this case. And that's how you learn the things that aren't in the report. So anecdotally, 2 or 3 of them told me, yeah, there's something up with Michael. We always had this feeling about Michael. And now John is saying Michael holds the key. And then the last piece, well, his affect changed during the interview and he was somewhat confused and he looked at me indignant. He said, "I don't understand why you're here. You have this victim." And he described this scene of a roadside down a ravine in a wooden box. He described this box and he described seeing all the police cars. The body was found. He described the newspaper article, "Girl in the Box." And Marie, at this point, we have no idea what he's talking about. And I'm thinking he's going high right here. And all of a sudden he says, "Oh, wait a minute. This guy you're looking at has killed other people. The police have found one of his victims. You guys haven't made the connection yet." So that was, and later that proved to be true. And the last part for me on that day, very simply, was when I heard John on the radio, he could connect to people through their family members. I heard this on the radio. So I asked him if he would call that victim's daughter. And in doing so, he started getting some information which she wasn't relating to. The detective kind of thought maybe it was related to him, and I'm sitting there quietly. And then lo and behold, he winds up telling me very personal information about my family, things that I was not even aware of that later on my parents were able to confirm. Every family has things. And John is telling me things about my family that I didn't even know about. that was impossible. He couldn't have looked these up in files, things of that nature. It was so I walked away that day confused. I could not. I'm a man of logic and evidence. I always say that the facts are what they are. I could not deny what John had said that day because they were so specific in nature. And that forced me to go back to him and ask him more questions because I'm a guy that needs to know how things work. And that curiosity drove me to keep going back to John to figure out how is it he's doing this? How does he know this? And that led to, a 25-year relationship over many, many different cases.
You guys have been doing this behind the scenes for 25 years?
Yeah, we have.
Yep.
And we had to keep it hidden, right? He certainly didn't
Yep.
want it out. And the last thing I wanted was for my colleagues or the FBI to know that I was talking to a psychic. I would have been at best laughed at worst fired. And I certainly didn't want that. So I had to keep our relationship secret for 25 years. And at times it was accomplished by cover stories, that kind of thing. But
Like I had some major death threat issues at Crossing Over Days, right? So the producers there knew it. One of the producers read the book and she called me up and went, "Oh my God, that's why he was there?" She's like, "This was all going on while you were recording the show." She's like, "All the times you got attacked in the media." She goes, "You don't whip out this little tidbit that you're doing this?" I went, "Nope."
Wow. Oh my God, what a story, guys.
yeah,
So, how many cases has John helped you solve?
a lot, and many of them are captured in the book that's coming out next week. But a lot, and sometimes it was a more significant impact. Sometimes it was just a little comment he would make. Hey, when you're doing this, look for this sign. Which to me, it seems silly. Some of the things like, yeah, okay, great, and then these little things would happen. And logically, it's easy to say, well, that's just a coincidence. But over time, I learned, John taught me how to trust these things, how to trust these signs. And over our years, not only did my relationship with John grow, but my ability to better understand the information he was providing also grew.
Wow.
And then just to just to kind of put a little caveat here, I don't work for the FBI. I jokingly say I work for a three-letter organization called the BOB, right? So I work for Bob, and I didn't solve anything. He solved stuff. My job is to do for him what I do with my clients. They come to me, I get the information, I give the information. What you do with it is on your own, right? He just used it. So I like to just
Yeah.
kind of Mr.
Wow. So John, did you know that this FBI agent had it out for you and now he's coming to see you? Did you know anything before this?
No, I treat everybody like they're coming out to get me. Like it's just it kind of goes with the subject matter, it's like you kind of have a big bullseye on your butt when you say you do this. So I've always found it helpful and healing to make sure that I don't just let my guard down. And by the way, even as of like the last few days, I had a couple moments where I was like reading some of the comments on another podcast that I had done a while ago that just dropped for this book. And it was nice. It was some very nice comments. And then there was those comments. It's like, oh, I can't believe this guy had him on the podcast. I can't believe that, he's a grifter. He's a this. He was exposed here, and they put like a YouTube link. And I'm just like, wow, 40 years in, doesn't matter. I've been tested at the University of Arizona, double blind studies, science doesn't matter. And I said to Bob, I go, let's get ready. I go, it's going to happen here. Like,
Wait, you were studied?
yeah, yeah, Dr. Gary Schwartz.
What
Uh,
did he do?
so at the University of Arizona, they did double blind studies. So back in 1999, there was an HBO documentary called America Undercover: Life After Life, produced by the journalist Linda Ellerby and Lucky Duck Productions. And she was hired to kind of do this documentary. And when they invited me to come on, they were looking to expose mediums there as well. They were one aspect of it was they said that they wanted to test us. And I remember thinking, well, how do we not do this? Like, how do I not say yes to this? Like, they want to actually do testing on our brains and the process. So I called Suzanne Northrup, who's another medium that I know. And I said to Suzanne, I go, did you get invited to do this? And she said, I did. I go, we have to do this, right? And she said, I think we have to do this. And we made a joke. We're like, oh, we're going to have to sit in the chair, like be tested. And it was an amazing experience. But like in the afterlife experiments, in Chasing Evil, it doesn't matter that Bob's the FBI guy and Bob's the FBI guy who's using this information. There will be those people who, when they read Chasing Evil, are going to turn around and be like, he's in on it.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
he's
yeah.
the guy, because that's where they're coming from in their
Yeah.
lives and how they look at stuff. And, I always give grace to those people. Bob was one of those people. Bob will give grace to those people because he was one of those people. When you're coming from a place of ignorance, when you don't understand something,
Yeah.
it's easy to attack it.
Yeah.
So I always hope that what I'm doing is helping to raise awareness and to teach.
Wow, wow, wow. Um, I obviously did not know. John never told me. Um, John never told me.
I didn't tell anybody. I kept this very, very quiet
What about
because
your wife?
Sandra knew. Sandra, listen,
Okay.
Sandra is this man's biggest fan. When she read the manuscript, she was like, "This is unbelievable." And she has listened to Bob tell the story, so it's kind of she's more interested in the Bob part of the story and the true crime of it than the psychic part of it.
Yeah. Well, that's what happens, right? Kevin is going to be bored of my stuff too. So Robert, like, how difficult was it for you to keep this information source quiet? Like, you probably wanted to sing from the rooftops at some point when it was just continuously working. And then, should, in your opinion, law enforcement be leaning on this a little bit more to help?
Yeah, so I never wanted to sing from the rooftops that I was talking to a psychic. That's the first thing. Majority of times I was able to be ambiguous enough when my colleagues would ask me questions to explain it away, if you will. But there were certain cases where my colleagues were present when they witnessed certain things take place, and they would say, "Hey, how did you know that? How did you know to look there? How did you know this?" And those agents, by the way, are in the book. They were all interviewed to tell their story. Their stories in these different cases are also shared. So there was a very close circle of people that through circumstance I had to reveal because if you and I are working a case and I find the body, well, Bob, how did you know to look there? All right, are you involved in this? And of course I'm not. So I had to explain that. To your second question, should investigators use psychics? Investigations don't start with psychics, right? Investigations start with facts and leads and witnesses and physical evidence. None of my cases, my first stop was never, oh, I'm going to call John on this case. There were many cases where I conducted investigation with John not being involved. But there were also many cases where all investigative avenues had been exhausted and there were no leads, no witnesses, no suspects, but we knew this person was missing or we knew this crime had occurred or this event. Those were the times when John was incredibly instrumental in giving me leads and giving me ideas and giving me strategies that I would not have otherwise had. And it was a journey for me understanding his value. In the beginning, it was the world is black and white. He's telling me X, but sometimes the information he or provided was in the way of, hey, look for this symbol, look for a soccer ball, look for this. And I would say, what does that mean? Like almost none of that, what you just said makes sense. And later on, as I'm working a case, it would manifest. And intellectually, you say, that's just a coincidence. That's just this. It's easy to explain it away. But over time, I learned what it meant and how to embrace it and leverage it. And the more experiences I had like that, the better I could understand what it meant.
Yeah, because it's hard. I mean, after years of knowing John and working with John, it's hard in the moment sometimes to know what the place is, like what he's saying, what place it has in kind of everything. And then you're like, oh, like I remember I called him after my mom was diagnosed with a brain tumor, and he was like, I see two. And I'm like, oh, frig, we're going to have two brain tumors? Never thinking it was going to be me.
Hmm.
I was the other brain tumor.
Wow.
And so, or he was telling us one time, he's like, you have someone in your business that wants to hurt you. No, the only person could be this person. He's in our trust. We love him. He's amazing. I'm telling you. And sometimes you don't want to listen because, I mean, breakups are hard enough in general. Now you have to break up with somebody who's in your face being nice. So it's like, it's hard. It's hard to take it all in. And sometimes, they'll say something like, think of this person. I don't even know that person's name. I've never heard of this person. And then later you find out through a family member, oh, this was your aunt or your aunt's baby that died that we never met or whatever. So it's fascinating, to unpack all of it. But it's such a cool relationship that you guys have done this for so long, quietly behind the scenes, and now you have this book detailing all these cases. So John Smith,
Mhm.
how did that all turn out?
Well, the abbreviated version is Michael was the key. Michael came forward. It took a lot of courage on his part, and he described what had happened with the first wife in Ohio, and which ultimately led us to find the box. And it was exactly as John described. It was on the side of a road. There was a newspaper article, girl in the box. It had already been found years earlier. She was buried as a Jane Doe, so we exhumed her body, confirmed who she was, and then we wound up convicting John Smith for her murder.
So the first wife, was that more of an accident and
There
they
are
try to
no
cover it up?
there are no accidents with John Smith. No, there were no
Okay.
accidents. He didn't accidentally dismember her. No, he
Oh, it was a dismembering. Okay. Well, what you said about the brother, it was brave of him to come forward. I didn't know if the first one was like an iffy and then he just.
no. The when I meant that, the brother had discovered the body years earlier and wanted to call the police, but his grandfather forbade him to do so. So it was a family secret. So he was going against all of his family by stepping
Mm.
out and cooperating with us. That's what I meant by that.
Oh, wow.
And Maria,
So John Smith behind bars?
Yes, he is.
What were you going to
Maria,
say, John?
one of the things that I think you would find fascinating when you read this is it feels like you start a marathon from the moment that the book begins, because we start talking about a case that postdates John Smith. So John Smith and Betty Fran are like these main characters that are kind of arcing the 3 decades that we've been working together. But some of the other stories and the experiences that Bob and I have kind of like had this tapestry of uh, criminality meets supernatural. I think you will be blown away by one specific story that happened at Yale University, Bob, the Annie Lee.
Oh, Annie Lee, yes.
Oh, well, I need to know now.
Mhm. So is
So,
this what is this where I'm supposed to tell the Annie Lee story?
so here's what happened. I'm in Dublin, Ireland, and there's a 6 hour time difference, and I'm getting ready to go do an event. So I'm in a car driving, and this happens over like a 2 day period. And I get a phone call from Bob, and most of our relationship has been he and I like over the phone because we've always lived in different states and different places, um, and Bob knows not to give me a lot of information, so he's like, "Do you have a minute?" And I said, "Well, I'm on a way to an event. What's going on?" And we start talking about the this case, and Bob, you can take it from there.
So there was a young woman named Annie Lee who was a student at Yale University who had disappeared. I was called up to assist in that investigation. Um, she was a small girl. They already had identified somebody who likely was responsible for her disappearance, and they were interviewing him. I get brought up there to help with the interrogation aspect of it. But ultimately, she had evaporated, right? And people don't just disappear. And the two schools of thought, she worked at a lab, a laboratory. She was a scientist at Yale. And she was a very small woman. She was less than 5 foot tall. So the school of thought was either this person who was responsible for her disappearance killed her, smuggled her out of her body out of the building, and she's in the landfill somewhere, or he's secreted her somewhere. So we've got FBI agents, state police, locals going at the landfill. All avenues are being pursued, and there's no sign of her. And I think it's the second day or third day I was up there, and I was actually at this laboratory when the conversation with John actually took place. And immediately it was like lightning striking. And this was a situation where you asked me, hey, were there times when your colleagues had to find out? Well, this was one. And John says, wait a minute, you're right there where she is. And I'm standing in this lab. He says, she's right there. And
Wait, John's in a car going to an event in Dublin, and he's like, hey, she's.
If the driver was paying attention to the conversation in the back seat, everything we wound up talking about wound up like on CNN International. So the guy was getting like a front row seat to what was actually going to be reported on the news. But what helped me in this case, Maria, is
The
I worked in a
hardest
hospital.
chills I've ever had in my life, all the way up and down my body. Wow.
I worked in a hospital, so I was starting to get flashes of the hospital, and I'm like, "This is a laboratory." I'm like, "There's a swipe card to get in,"
right.
and he's like, "Yeah." I was like, "She swiped in, but didn't swipe out." Like, and then I was getting like images of the laboratory that I had worked at, and I was like, "Bob, are you seeing this?" I go, "Is there a place where there's?" I think I asked you about a little refrigerator or a little
Mini fridge. And so on my end, I'm standing with Connecticut State Police who had processed this place and some FBI agents. I'm on the phone with John. They have no idea what's going on. And John says, Bob, where's the mini fridge? So now I have to turn to these folks and say, hey guys, did you find a mini refrigerator? And they look at me and go, yeah. I said, where is it? So now we're all walking through this labyrinth of hallways like a maze. And they're showing me this mini fridge. John's on the phone. He says, all right, there's two doors. There's one on the right, one on the left. The mini fridge is in the middle. I said, yeah. He says, she's in the left. She's right in that room. And he's emphatic. She's there. She's going to that room. Her body's right there. So I said, guys, did you go in that room? I said, yeah. I said, go in that room again. So we open it up and it's this industrial, it was like a furnace room. It was very clean, noisy, and there's these large pipes everywhere. So now there's 5 or 6 of us looking for this victim. We're looking for this body. And on the right, on one of the walls, there was a partial footprint about 7 feet up. And I said, whose footprint is that? And nobody could really understand it. And I'm on the phone saying, John, she's not here. And he says, no, she's right there. And he says, what's to the right? The room to the right of that. And I said, guys, what's on the other side? They said, it's a bathroom. And John's like, she's like in the pipes. I'm like, she's in the pipes. And these pipes were very large. And I'm thinking, how could somebody put her in the pipes? So the condensed version is we searched this room, she's not there. We searched the next room, she's not there. And I say, John, I really appreciate it, but she may have been here. She's not here. So now I hang up the phone and my colleagues and who are interviewing this book say, what was that? And now I have to explain my relationship with John. I said, John, I'm sorry, she's not here. I leave, I think it was the next day, and I drive back to Washington, D.C. I just came over the Delaware Memorial Bridge and the agent calls me on the phone and says, Bob, you're not going to believe this. Her body was in the wall between those two rooms where we were. That's where he put her. He opened the wall on the bathroom side and there was an access door and he put her body between the pipes. So she was exactly where John said she was. And even in that case, I'm like, sorry, John, you're wrong here.
Oh my God.
Right.
Wow.
Yeah.
I mean, this is like mind blowing because you just think of there's so many unsolved cases out there that I mean, John, you have a whole side career in criminology.
Nope, no, I don't.
Is this something you want to do more of?
Not even a little bit.
Really?
I think the journey for me, like we always talk about healing, right? We talk about transformation. Bob represented a catalyst for me to recognize that I had unresolved issues, trauma, dealing with my dad, who was a New York City police officer. And I think this was a universal opportunity, if I could be transparent and vulnerable with the audience, for me to recognize that what I thought I did the work on, I did to the best I could at that time period. And then the universe said, guess what? We're going to go deeper. You're going to go deeper. And we're going to send somebody in that represents the aspect of the patriarchal energy that you shunned most of your life to protect yourself from, the negativity that came with that. And although I did not think I needed approval, and I wasn't ever seeking approval from my dad, indirectly on an unconscious level, working with Bob was satisfying that level of value. Like I showed and received value by working with Bob that I never got that validation from my dad. I never got that from him. So for me, this wasn't like I have a new side hustle. I'm going to go work for the, for the Bureau. I'm going to go do this in different aspects. It was never an interest. Whenever people would bring me cases, I would very politely say that's not the work that I do, because it's not the work that I do. It's not my focus. I would never want to work with families because of their emotional connections to the case. They don't have objectivity. Bob had complete objectivity to everything he did, and it just worked with him. So there have been other cases. There was somebody did. I mean, a police officer came to me on a case and asked me for help, and I said, "Yes, I will." And even in that case, I asked the police officer to talk to Bob because somehow Mr. Hilland knows how to work with this brain and to extrapolate information on a psychic level that seems to work.
Wow. Did it work with the other cop?
Yeah, I think it did, Bob, right? We were successful in one arena. It had to do with the California mudslides.
Wow.
Yeah.
And now, Robert, you're retired?
I'm retired. I have another career. I provide training to other government agencies. I'm training the next generation of guys like me. That's what I'm doing now.
Wow. Um, John, that's really interesting that this helped you kind of heal that with your dad. At what point do you feel like that kind of closed for you, that whole loop?
I think the book actually became this punctuated moment, right? Because you're writing a book, we have to relive these stories. I have objective understanding, looking back on stuff, re-listening to Bob giving me the case files because Bob doesn't even need to look at a case file. He can give you date, names, times, places. The big joke between us is like when we do these interviews, I kind of feel like Bob comes with all the official stuff, and I'm like, I see pictures, I hear thoughts, I get feelings. But the reality is, it gave me this objective ability to review the last 25 years. And my dad passed in 2002. So him passing in 2002, I'm now safe from that moment on. So I didn't have to protect myself from that energy any longer. Matter of fact, the moment I found my dad pass, I welcomed it back into my life because I knew that he's no longer that energy. So I was very open in the last 25 years that I feel like I've had a relationship with my dad. So his passing, me welcoming him as an energy into my life, and then doing this book, and then over the last couple of years, reviewing all of this on paper, in writing, in conversation, you start to look at things in a certain way, reflecting on, my kids being at the ages, 18 and 22, like all of that now, just kind of, that's how my brain works. My brain works, look for the lesson. What's the lesson? What have I learned from this? What was this book a catalyst for? So I did the work. I did the
What
deep.
was the lesson?
The lesson for me was that I had value in the eyes of myself. Like I didn't need it from my dad, but that in recognizing that maybe I was always seeking it and never got it, but didn't know that I was seeking it because I did the work. I was good,
Mm-hmm.
and I wound up dealing with the same thing with my mom. I think I was about 45 years old, and I was working with a doctor, and there's a woman there. Her name is Angela. And she runs a company called Cyberscan, and she was cyber scanning me. And when she did the cyber scan, it kind of came up that I was having all these issues with my lungs and cervical disc disease. And I remember saying to her, like, none of that is me. And she said, no, this is you. And then I thought about it and I went, well, this is kind of weird. I go, my mom was misdiagnosed with cervical disc disease before they found out that it was terminal lung cancer. And she said, well, it looks like we have some work to do. She goes, you have some trapped grief that you need to work on. And I laughed. I went, no, I think I'm good there. I was like, you know what I do for a living, right? And she said, I do. She goes, well, how did you deal with it? I said, I dealt with it from my perspective. And then she asked the question. She goes, what perspective was that? I go, from the perspective of a 19-year-old kid who lost his 48-year-old mom. I was like, I've written books about it. I've talked about it. I've lectured about it. I go, I think I'm good. And she said, well, did you do it from the perspective of a 45-year-old father of two? And it was just like, no, I didn't. So subconsciously, those patterns of understanding that I was probably now the age my mother was when she got sick and didn't know it because she passed at 48, your unconscious mind was now looking at where I was in my life, where I was coming from, and all of that. And it was actually coming out in my energy that she was able to read. And we live in different states and she didn't know anything about me. So it's like, okay, time to go back in there and do the work. So I think all of us can do a review of where we're at, where we're coming from, so that we can create where we're projecting as a healthy opportunity.
Wow. So your dad, correct me if I'm wrong, represented all of those haters you see on Instagram that don't want to believe your gifts.
Right. My father told me, don't sully my name, and also told me to make sure that I never work with the police. Don't embarrass them. So I jokingly said I didn't work with the police. I work with the FBI.
You told him?
No, he never knew.
He never knew.
Never knew.
So that makes so much sense. I mean, you can believe in yourself all you want, but there's always something you need from your parents, whether you like it or not. It's just, I think it's like an innate thing. And so I now know what I see in your face. I now know what I feel from you. It's this book. I didn't know if it was Evolve or the book, but I was like, something has satiated him. And now I know.
Yeah, we talked about that the other day. And one of the things, Maria, that I feel like for every listener that is listening and watching, you have represented for years how it's important for you to heal and help to transform where we're at. But I never want anybody to look at a person as a guru, right? It doesn't matter that I'm John Edward, the psychic medium who can do this. At the core, I'm John the person.
Mm-hmm.
Robert Hilland, superstar FBI guy, doing all these great things. At the core, he's still a human having experience. It doesn't matter who we think we are or what our accomplishments are. We're all here to evolve. We're all here to kind of transform and heal through the lessons that the universe puts in front of us. The important thing is to be able to recognize and stay on top of that.
I love that. Wow. Well, this has been amazing. I want more of this. I know you don't want more of this, but I want more of this. I think this would be such an amazing show. First of all, this should be a movie. Chasing Evil should end up being a movie. It probably is already on track for that, right?
We are talking to a few companies about scripted documentaries.
Yeah. Yeah. This is literally just gold because it's fascinating. It's all the things that people don't want to believe in or do believe in, all of that conflict. I mean, Robert, I'm sorry, but you are the perfect person because you can tell there's no BS. You are not woo woo. There's nothing woo woo about you. And so
He's a little woo now. He's mini woo.
I don't know about that, but you're right.
Let's make him a shirt. I'm mini woo now. But I think it's fascinating. And I wonder, did any of the victims' families ever find out that John was the one who was contributing?
There were a couple of cases. As a matter of fact, one of those family members are in the book. She was interviewed in an unrelated case. She was connected to an investigation and with no leads. And I actually brought her to meet John for a specific reason in that case. And so she's interviewed in the book as well.
Wow. I can't wait to read this. I'm so, so excited. Friends, if you want to read it as well, we will link Chasing Evil, the book by Robert and John, in the description of this episode. We'll also put the Evolve platform in there if you guys want to participate in that. John's giving us a little special gift in there. John, will you share with everybody what you're sharing?
Two things. I'm going to tell you guys that if you're interested in learning more about the Evolve Plus platform, if you go to evolveplustv.com, use the code Heal Squad, and that'll help give a discount for the year. And I would like to end with a little bit of an affirmation mantra kind of meditation you guys can do. It's called Reinforce. I make today better as yesterday is over. The past and my fears I release to the universe and greet the future with guidance, wisdom, protection, love, and support. I am empowered. I am respected. I am heard with only positive words. I encircle myself in the white light of universal love and divine protection and ask my spiritual team for assistance, love, protection, and insights to navigate my life, my family, and my work, especially with, this is where you set your intentions, I release what no longer serves me, my evolution, and my path.
I love that. All right, I just want to thank John and Robert for joining us today. Friends, if you guys loved this episode, please do me a favor and share it with a friend or two. Their new book, Chasing Evil, is out now. To find out more details about that, plus how to access John's Evolve Plus platform, check out the show notes below. Until next time, friends, be nice people, make good choices, and be present. Hey, Heal Squad. We have been on quite the journey together, and we're hearing from so many of you just how much this show is helping you heal and get better, and it makes us feel so good. We love, love, love it, and we just ask that you don't keep it to yourself. Spread the message and share the show or your favorite episode with your friends. And if you want to help us even more, you can leave us a 5-star rating and a comment on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, and follow us on Instagram at Heal Squad. You can also DM us anytime because we love connecting with you. And finally, you can also join us on Patreon for our monthly live heal events with world-class healers and ad-free episodes exclusive only to Patreon and our Super Heal Squad for as little as $10 a month. So go to patreon.com/Heal Squad to join. Getting better isn't easy, friends, but as I say all the time, it's a whole lot easier if we can do it together. We love you all so much, and we love doing this thing called life with you.
This podcast and all related content published or distributed by or on behalf of Maria Menounos or mariamenounos.com is for informational purposes only and may include information that is general in nature and that is not specific to you. Any information or opinions expressed or contained herein are not intended to serve as or replace medical advice, nor to diagnose, prescribe, or treat any disease, condition, illness, or injury, and you should consult the healthcare professional of your choice regarding all matters concerning your health, including before beginning any exercise, weight loss, or healthcare program. If you have or suspect you may have a healthcare emergency, please contact a qualified healthcare professional for treatment. Any information or opinions provided by a guest expert or host featured within website or on company's podcast are their own, not those of Maria Menounos or the company. Accordingly, Maria Menounos and the company cannot be responsible for any results or consequences or actions you may take based on information or opinions.